So we are carrying on today, inshallah, going through the Usul-ul-fiqh book, or understanding Usul-ul-fiqh. We have reached the section of Ijma Sahaba. We have already been through the first two sources of Shariah, i.e. the Quran and the Sunnah, which we went through in some detail. Just to give a brief explanation of the aim of the session, is that we want to study these subjects in a practical way, not just in an academic way, not just in a theoretical way, a way that can help us in understanding the difference between legitimate Islam and what is illegitimate. Because, of course, Usul-ul-fiqh is the methodology of extracting law, the methodology of jurisprudence, of fiqh. And today many people, they quote hadith or an ayah or an example from the Sahaba, and they just invent opinions. They'll say, oh, this happened. So, for example, with Kashmir, they will say, Rasulullah compromised in Surah Hudaybiyah, in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Therefore we can compromise, we can call upon the UN, we can do that. So, in order to detect and to be able to distinguish between what is legitimate, i.e. what actually is a valid Islamic opinion, and what contradicts Islam and what goes against the whole methodology of law in Islam, these sessions will help us in doing that, as well as appreciating how laws are extracted, as well as appreciating how the hukam, how the Islamic rules are linked to the dalil and the evidences. So that's the whole aim of the session, just as a recap. So we have reached the point about the third source of Sharia. Before we go into the details, the first thing to realize is sometimes people who have a lack of knowledge, they assume that Islam only has two sources of Sharia. So they'll say, no, the only two sources in Islam are the Kitab and the Sunnah. So they'll quote the hadith. Rasulullah said, there are two things, if you stick to them, you'll never go astray. The Book of Allah and my Sunnah. That is true. And of course, many texts such as that. However, this does not mean that the Kitab and the Sunnah are the only sources. It means that they are the primary sources. They are the fundamental sources. Now, Ijma, Sahaba and Qiyas, they are built on top of the Quran and the Sunnah. And the Quran and the Sunnah prove them. And thus, that's why we accept them as definitive sources. So in the book, the way we have structured it is that we are first talking about those sources of law which are not disputed, i.e. the scholars generally agree upon them. So generally, the scholars agree upon Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, Sahaba and Qiyas. We will talk about Qiyas later on. Then scholars dispute upon other types of sources, and there are areas of ikhtilaf which we will go into later on. So Ijma Sahaba is not a standalone source. It's not like Quran. It's not like Sunnah as a standalone source. In fact, when we go through it, we will see it's an indication of the Sunnah. That's how we understand it. So let's go through the definition of it in the language, and then the actual meaning of it in usul, and then examples and explanation of that, right? So from a linguistic point of view, ijma is a verbal noun in the Arabic word ajma, which has two meanings. Number one, to determine. Secondly, to agree upon something. There are many types of ijma discussed in the books of Usul-ul-fiqh. Some of these are ijma al-ummah, the consensus. So if we roughly translate it, it's consensus or agreement of. Ijma al-mujtahideen, the consensus of the scholars of mujtahideen. Ijma ahl al-bayt, the consensus of the family of the Prophet. Ijma of the people of Medina. Ijma al-sahaba, Now, the one which we are concerned with here is ijma al-sahaba, of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this is the one which we have clear-cut evidence for, and which is the one which is considered undisputed, and which is definitive. So, it is the one which we have put first, because people don't, in the Ahlul Sunnah, for example, in the scholars, you will not find any difference between the Shafis and the Hanafis and the Malikis and the Zahiris. Everyone accepts Ijma al-Sahaba. You will not find somebody say, oh, but I don't accept it as an evidence, right? Everyone accepts it as an evidence. So, here we just basically explain the concept. If the Sahaba, after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were to agree unanimously upon a solution to a problem without any dissent amongst each other in the absence of a ruling from the Quran and Sunnah, then this agreement is considered to be a dalil. We have to go back to the section of Sunnah, remember the Sunnah was compiled, okay, or was categorized and authenticated later on. It was not something which was fully done after the death of Rasulullah. Yes, some of the Sahaba we discussed, like Abu Hurairah, he actually wrote down the hadith after the death of the Prophet. Anas ibn Malik and others, they were experts in that. But the full compilation took place, okay, later on at the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, where he employed Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, who started off the science of hadith effectively. Then Bukhari and Muslim and people came later on. So now when we understand that, some people may say it could be possible that there are some hadith which are lost. Right? Isn't it? That if the hadith were compiled later on, people raise the issue. How do we, it's possible some hadith were lost. They could have been mentioned by Rasulullah but not transmitted to us because the narrator of it has died. Okay, so let's say some Sahabi, he knew of a hadith, then he went off to Iraq on jihad and he died, khalas. He was not there at the time of Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri who went around to find out the hadith and compile them and all of that. So that's true. That possibility does exist. Therefore, Ijma al-Sahaba fills in all of those gaps. This is the whole issue. Ijma al-Sahaba, how are we understanding it? That after the death of Rasulullah, so not within the life of the Prophet, because within the life of the Prophet you have the Sunnah. But after the death of the Prophet, if the Sahaba unanimously agreed upon something which is not directly mentioned in the text, or sometimes it may even oppose text, okay, it may even seem like conflicting with the hadith. If all of them, not an individual, not some of them, if all of them unanimously agreed for the rest of their lives until they died without dispute, then surely that is an indication that they must have known of an evidence from Rasulullah which is not conveyed to us. Because how could they all agree upon something which is a lie, upon something which is a mistake, upon something which is wrong? And we're going to prove why they can't all agree, right? So, we give some simple examples of Ijma Sahaba before going into the dalil of it, so that we just grasp the whole meaning of the concept, okay? The simple example, which is a clear-cut example of Ijma, is after the death of Rasulullah. We have an existing text which talk about be quick in certain things. The burial of the dead is one of them. So we know from the hadith, it is haram to delay the burial. Okay? In origin. So if some Muslim dies, we can't just delay the burial of the dead person and wait, like some people, they have a weird custom here, like if they are born in Bangladesh or Pakistan or wherever, they say, no, the body must be transported there. All of this is haram because you are delaying the burial of the dead person for no legitimate reason. Just for the sake of transporting it. You should bury them wherever they are, where they die, right? Now, we have this hadith, but at the same time, okay, the Sahaba unanimously agreed to delay the burial. They did not immediately do it. Okay, in fact, they waited 2 days to bury Rasulullah. So now, what have the scholars explained regarding this incident? Okay, why did they delay the burial? And what does that indicate? Does it indicate any type of dalil for us? So one of the famous scholars in the 1400s, Al-Haythami, rahimullah, he said, it is known that the Sahaba consented, i.e. it is ijma, that selecting the Imam after the end of the era of prophethood was a wajib, an obligation. Indeed, they made it more important than the other wajibat, whilst they were busy with it over the burial of Rasulullah. So here, it is understood that this is the reason that appointing of the Khalifa, appointing of the Imam is more important as a fard than burial of the Prophet. Because within the fara'id, there are priorities, there is prioritization. There can be two or many things which are fard. But if one of them is priority of the other, which is given by the Shariah, then you have to do that. So they appointed all the senior companions, Abu Bakr, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, Umar, they went to discuss with the Muhajirin, Sa'ad ibn Mu'ad, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. Okay, they were the leaders of the Sahaba. And they had a debate. And that debate eventually led to the election of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq as the Khalifa. And then later on, the next day after that, they went to bury Rasulullah. So here we have to understand that this is a clear indication of ijma, because it indicates that the Sahaba unanimously agreed. Okay, Ali, like the Shia say, Ali was not consulted. Right? The Shia raised that issue, but so what? He was with the family of Rasulullah because he is his relative, and he was helping with the preparation of the body and with his relatives. Secondly, did he ever dispute the bay'ah? No. Why did he serve, isn't it? If it was manipulated as they say, they manipulated the power, then why did he just dispute it? When Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was elected as Khalifa, in fact there is a hadith which Imam Muslim reported, that that he gave the bay'ah to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq later on. Okay, he came to the masjid and Abu Bakr spoke to him, and he didn't refuse. So silence is consent when it comes to bay'ah. He didn't rebuke, he didn't fight against, he didn't stand up, he didn't say that Abu Bakr is a mutasallit, a usurper of power. Rather, he accepted him, and he accepted to serve within his administration, within the ruling. Okay, even later on, he was an assistant of Uthman in ruling. So how can it be that he rejected? That is a lie. That is a fabrication and an invention. So therefore, it is an ijma. All of the Sahaba consented that the appointment of the Khalifa, it is more important, it is more of a priority than the death of Rasulullah. Now remember here, some people make a mistake here. They try to take the time limit of appointing the Khalifa from this incident. It is not from this incident, because this incident just indicates the priority. It doesn't give you the exact time limit. It was just incidental that it was 2 days. It doesn't say, there was nothing in the text that indicates that it has to be 2 days or it has to be 3 days or whatever. That's later on, and we will discuss that later on. So here we give a quotation in page 75 of the famous Hanafi scholar Al-Taftazani, who wrote about this issue again. He said, there is an ijma, consensus, that appointing an imam is wajib. Okay, and then he explains the hadith about whoever dies without knowing the imam of his time dies the death of jahiliyyah. And then he also says, also the ummah agreed that this was the most important duty following the death of Rasulullah. So important in fact that they consider it more important than the matter of his burial. Okay, and so also has it been after the death of each imam. Meaning after the death of each khalifa, it was an immediate priority. So sometimes when we mention this incident in Dawah, when we say that look, the Khalifa today has been absent in the world for 87 years, the Khilafah was destroyed. Therefore, where is the urgency? Where is the priority to appoint the Khalifa? And we use this incident. Some people say, well, you are just making this up, because they have not been told. But the ulama in history, the scholars in history, they realize that this is an ijma of the Sahaba. Okay, an ijma of Sahaba is a dalil that shows the urgency and the priority. Also, we have another ijma that Umar radiallahu anh, when he was on his deathbed, we know what occurred. Umar was leading the salah and he was stabbed, okay, by a Majusi, a fire worshipper, and it took him a long time to die. His wounds were not so bad that he died immediately. It took him some time to die. So the Sahaba, they asked him, okay, appoint somebody, do what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq did, consult the people and appoint who you think should be the ruler after you. And Umar did not agree to that. He didn't agree to appointing one man. In the end, he appointed a council. He appointed a council of 6 of the most senior of the Sahaba, who were what we know, 6 of those from Ashra Mubashra, the people who promised paradise, who were left, okay, who were surviving. So they included Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman ibn Affan, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqas, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, Az-Zubayr ibn Al-Awwam, and Talha ibn Ubaidullah. So these were 6 of the companions who were appointed, that within, and now we have another ijma, within 3 days, okay, Umar radiallahu anhu put a time limit. So we have the narration from At-Tabari here, and it has been reported in other books also, that he put a time limit, okay, and he put a specific instructions. It was not so general that, okay, within 3 days, you just do it. He didn't just leave it as that. Because if it was just as that, then it could be possibly disputed. Somebody may argue, a scholar could argue, well, he just suggested 3 days. It's not definite. It could be more than 3 days. But here we have clear-cut things. He said here, okay, I have therefore decided to make it, the selection of the Khalifa, a matter of consultation among you, so that you may select one of yourselves as Khalifa. If 5 of you agree upon one man, and there is one who is opposed to the 5, kill him. If 4 are on one side and 2 are on the other, kill the 2. If 3 are on one side and 3 on the other, then let Abdurrahman ibn Auf arbitrate, okay, without having the casting vote. The Khalifa will be selected from his party. In that case, kill the 3 men on the opposing side. You may wish if you invite some of the chief men of the Ansar as observers, but the Khalifa must be one of you Muhajirin and not any of them. They have no share in the Khilafah. Okay, now, what do we understand? Omar, he is saying here that within 3 days, okay, and 2 nights, there must be a decision, okay, and there must be one person selected as a Khalifa, and it must be accepted unanimously. And if people start to dispute about that, kill them. Now he is talking about killing not only Muslims, he is not only Sahaba, but those Sahaba who were the promised Jannah. So how could Umar order the killing of the Sahaba, and none of them, none of the Ansar and the Muhajirin who knew about this, they all knew about this incident, disputed it. Because somebody may say there is a confusion between what we call Ra'i of Sahaba, the individual opinion of a companion, or the ijtihad, the derivation of a companion, and ijma, the consensus of the companions. So we have to draw a distinction between those two things here. That here, it is not the ijtihad of Umar. First of all, ijtihad can't happen in definite areas. So killing of the Muslims is haram, which is clear-cut in the Quran and the Sunnah. So how can it be ijtihad? Ijtihad only occurs in areas which are non-definite from the existing texts. Okay, meaning there are areas of interpretation. And if it was ijtihad, then we can see people can dispute it. Of course, like Omar, he tried to fix the mahar. A woman disputed, what are you doing? You can't do that, it goes against Quran. Even a simple woman could do that. Imagine Ali, who we say, وَأَقْدَاهُمْ Ali, the judiciary and the knowledge of Ali, he was one of the best of the scholars. He would have disputed that. How can you order the killing of the companions? But none of them disputed. Everyone accepted. This means it's clear-cut that it is an ijma, it is a consensus. They must have known of a dalil that has not been transmitted to us. So therefore that incident itself serves as the dalil, that the time limit for appointing the Khalifa for the Muslims is 3 days and 2 nights. And that is fixed because he ordered the killing of Muslims if they didn't do it within that time. So it means it's a fard and it is fixed, and we cannot change that time. We can't say, well, it is indefinite, we can go on forever without a Khalifa. It's a fard and obligation. I will go into these 2 examples we just put at the beginning just to understand the concept of ijma. Later on I will go into other examples. Here now let's go into what is the dalil indicating the authority of ijma. And this is very important. Somebody may say, well, okay, you are saying that ijma sahaba is a source of Shariah, but how do we prove it? What is the proof, okay, from the Quran for that? First of all, the proof is within the ayat of Quran. Number 1 is Allah Azzawajal has praised the Sahaba as a group, not as an individual here or there. He has in this ayah which we talk about, wasabiqun, okay, we talk about the vanguard, the sabiqun, the first, and the awwalun who forsook their homes and they gave them the muhajirin and the ansar, okay. Even the ayah actually mentions min al-muhajirin wal-ansar. So it talks about the Sahaba. It's blatant. It's talking about the muhajirin were the immigrants, the people who migrated from Makkah. The ansar were the helpers, the people of Medina. Those who follow them in the good deeds, Allah is well pleased with them. So it says, Radu Allahu anhu wa radu anhu. Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him. And Allah has made them in His promise them ready with gardens underneath which rivers flow, etc. So this compliment is given to the Sahaba for the sole reason of having been the Sahaba. However, the compliment for others, because somebody may say, but the ayah says, well, also it talks about those who follow them. Right? But that linkage of those who follow them is because they are following who? So the primary issue in the ayah is the Sahaba, okay, and those who follow them. So the Sahaba are the ones being emphasized in the ayah. And this means the original compliment is for them, okay. So this is the first evidence that we use, that Allah compliments them as a group. So say so, as a group, they could be upon misguidance. As a group, they could be upon something which is wrong, an error in the deen. Then how can Allah compliment them as a group? because they could be against the Shariah of Allah. So let's take the example. Let's say what Umar said was actually haram. And as a group, the Sahaba just consented to the killing of a Muslim. Then that would be a corruption in the deen. And then how can Allah praise them all? You see, so it contradicts the whole concept of Allah praising them as a collective. Okay, that's the first angle. We have to realize here that unfortunately even our scholars have forgotten these concepts. So I was talking to an ex-leader of an Islamic group who is so-called an alim, a scholar. And when I was talking about the Islamic ruling system, he was saying, well, Islam has no defined ruling system. So I was talking about some points from the Sunnah and from Ijma Sahaba. He said, no, we don't accept Ijma Sahaba. That is not a dalil. So even though he is a so-called alim, he studied Shariah for so many years, he doesn't, because he is not usuli, he has not studied the foundations of jurisprudence. I said, brother, be careful of what you are saying. You actually know the consequence of what you are saying. You can go outside of the deen. And I went into the discussion with him saying, okay, who compiled the Quran? This is the next argument. Okay? To prove Ijma as-Sahaba. That Allah has protected the Quran from corruption. Who compiled the Quran? The Sahaba. After the death of Rasulullah, we know, yes, there was a written version from the scribes of the Prophet, but the actual verification and the compilation process was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq appointed Zayd to do that job, and that was done. So it is by the continuous transmission, i.e. the reports of the Sahaba and the written verification, that the Quran was compiled. So now if we are to doubt in the unanimous view of the Sahaba, then we could put a doubt in the Quran. Because maybe they made a mistake. Okay? Isn't it? If you say maybe their consensus is prone to error, then maybe there is a mistake in the Quran, which is not conceivable. Okay? So this is the second very strong way of arguing it. So meaning that the deen has been conveyed to us through the vehicle. Now there are some scholars who give additional evidences. Okay? So if you look at some of the scholars, they will give the hadith, like خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ كَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُم. You hear that in the khutbah every week. The best generation is mine, then the one after, and the one after that. Okay. Some people give additional hadith. Follow my sunnah and the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashideen. Okay, which is a hadith. Now the reason we have not put all those other evidences here is that those evidences are from Khabar Ahad hadith, number one. Okay? So we want to prove this as a definitive source of Sharia. So if it comes, although the meaning of them may be clear, okay, but as we can't use indefinite to prove a definite source of Sharia. That's why we have just relied upon the ayat here. We're giving as a definitive concept rather than giving it as a speculative thing, okay, where people could then possibly argue. They'll say, well, that's Khabar Ahad, it can be different, the difference of opinion, this and that. So we don't want to get into all those arguments. Therefore we are focusing upon the qat'i issues. Now, here we need to realize something, okay, that just because something is a source, just as Quran, just as Sunnah, it does not mean the end conclusion of that the daleel is going to be definite in authenticity. Nor is it going to necessarily be definite in meaning. Okay? Just because it's a source, just like Quran, we discussed, Quran is definite in authenticity, we know all of it. But the meaning, we have explained so many areas in the Quran where it's subject to difference of opinion, because the ayah in meaning is not definite. Okay? Where the word has more than one meaning, it is mushtarak, it is what we call from the mutashabihat, from the areas which are not clear. So we gave so many examples when we went through the Quran. Similarly in the Sunnah. The same thing is in Ijma. Ijma can also be definite in riwayah, in thubut, in narration. And it can be indefinite also. And it can be something definite in meaning, or it can also be indefinite in meaning. It is not necessarily definite, just because it is from Ijma. That's why it is a source, just as Quran, Sunnah, we consider Ijma Sahaba. But the scholars then have to look, and we have to look at those evidences and see where they fall into. So that's why we mention here, just as with the hadith, the Ijma Sahaba can be qat'i or dhanni in transmission and in meaning. Its reports are mentioned in the books of tariq, okay, history, such as the history of Tabari, or we have other books like Al-Dhahabi's 30 volume, the Tariq, the history of Al-Dhahabi, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya of Ibn Kathir. Okay, many books which are written by the scholars which are like of history, which include the reports of Ijma Sahaba and other things from the Sahaba. Now, it is from Isnad, basically. The concept is that how do we know an incident occurred at the time of Sahaba? It is in the same way that hadith are compiled. It is from a chain of narration. So, for example, the fact that Umar appointed 6 people, that is mutawatir, that he appointed 6 people. It is reported in a definite way. It is there in Bukhari, it is there in Tabari, it is there in Ibn Kathir, it is there in so many chains. Because everyone has reported that incident, or so many people have reported. So that is a definitive thing. Okay? So there are certain issues which are definite in Ijma, in narration also. So we have to appreciate that. It can be from a book of hadith also. So the books of hadith like Bukhari narrate, for example, the appointment of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. It talks also not only about the hadith from Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it includes the narrations of the companions, includes the narration, even later actually, Bukhari also reports the narration of Abdullah ibn Umar when he gave the bay'ah to Abdul Malik bin Marwan. What did he say? What was the text of the bay'ah? So it includes Bukhari and Muslim and the other books of hadith also include incidents which deal with the Sahaba. Or it could be in the books of fiqh also. For example, the Kitab al-Umm of Shafi'i and the books of the other scholars, they also sometimes narrate an incident of Ijma. Okay, so they will say this incident occurred and they give the narration. Okay, so we have to realize that again, Ijma Sahaba is from Isnad, it's from narration. Now, let me give you some examples or more examples in what is contained in the book so that we appreciate Ijma Sahaba as a source of law and what types of ahkam are extracted from it. Okay, so a simple example of an area which is not definite Ijma is the example of Taraweeh. Okay, so Taraweeh is coming up now in Ramadan. Umar radiallahu anh in his time instituted Taraweeh 20 rak'ah. So most of the scholars, most of the madhahib say it's Ijma. So they say 20 rak'ah is Ijma. Now, the Zahiriyah, the literalist school, they use a hadith which says Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam prayed 8 rak'ah. Okay? So they use the hadith to say, no, this hadith overrides because you go to the sunnah before Ijma and this hadith is explicit, so therefore we don't look at that. However, the issue is disputed because other scholars say the hadith does not specify Taraweeh. The hadith is just a night prayer. So it indicates actually it is tahajjud. Okay? So it's an area of ikhtilaf. It's not a definitive area. Although scholars argue very strongly that it is a stronger opinion because Umar, how could he contradict the hadith? Although that narration is from Khabrahat, this is the issue. It's not definitive in its narration about Umar. So it's something which is a disputed area, but the scholars argue that 20 rak'ah is a strong opinion. Okay, so we have to realize it's in one of those areas of differences. Another example, what is narrated by Ijma Sahaba, is the example of taqleed. Okay, of the Sahaba. Most of them were mujtahideen. They were scholars. They were able to extract the hukum from the evidence. However, they used to make taqleed to each other's opinion. Okay, so it's reported by the tabi'een, they reported, because they were the students of the Sahaba, that Fulan Sahabi, he used to leave his opinion for the opinion of Umar. This Sahabi used to leave his opinion for the opinion of Ali. Okay, they used to go and leave their opinion for another scholar's opinion, which means the permissibility of taqleed, of following somebody, and which is also evidence from the Sunnah. Now we have to appreciate sometimes scholars, when they want to discuss a topic comprehensively, they will give, like when we talk about the Khilafah or other subjects, we give the evidence from Quran and Sunnah and Ijma. Okay? Just to make it watertight. So taqleed, the same thing. People will give ayah of Quran that we study later on. Follow Ahl al-Dhikr, follow the people of knowledge. If you don't know, that's from ayah. Then we use the hadith, which says the cure for the lack of knowledge is to ask. Then we use ijma. Okay? So we give, when we want to present a subject in a strong way, normally we give from Quran, from Sunnah and from Ijma to make it a very strong argument, right? So it is also used as a supplementary evidence. Another example of Ijma is the example of a mujtahid being allowed to leave his opinion for the sake of the unity of the ummah. Okay, normally a scholar, a mujtahid who is able to extract the hukm of Allah from the evidence, he is not allowed to leave his opinion if he believes his opinion to be true. If he believes his opinion is not strong and somebody else has more knowledge, then he can. But say so, like Uthman radiallahu anh, he has his own opinions. But when they gave him the bay'ah, when Umar had died and the Sahaba were consulting, and Abdurrahman ibn Auf became the chairperson of the discussion, and he went around to the people to ask them who they wanted as the Khalifa, he came back and he asked, okay, before he gave the bay'ah to Uthman, he said, do you give the bay'ah upon the kitab, the sunnah and the opinions of Abu Bakr and Umar? Because the people, the Muslims, they don't want change. They didn't want a drastic change. They didn't want Uthman to come and then implement his own opinions, okay, that will change things. So they wanted the same as what's been going on from Abu Bakr and Umar. So Uthman radiallahu anh, he accepted, okay, and Abdurrahman ibn Auf gave him the bay'ah, and the Sahaba Ali, in fact, was the first to give the bay'ah to him. So here, the Sahaba gave the bay'ah and accepted. So this shows the permissibility of a mujtahid leaving his opinion for the sake of unity. Okay, because the ummah had, demanded that issue. So it's a permissibility, it's not an obligation here. Ali radiallahu anh was asked first by Abdurrahman, and Ali said no. Abdurrahman said to him, do you accept to rule by the Quran and the Sunnah and the opinions of Abu Bakr and Umar? He said, no, I will rule by my own opinion. So it means it is not an obligation that a mujtahid, if he was going to become Khalifa, it is not obligatory for him to leave his own opinion. Ali was very independent. He said, I will rule by my own opinion. So Abdurrahman refused that because the Ummah had wanted the Khalifa, and that was the majority view in the Ummah, and that was the whole process of electing of the Khalifa, that the majority of the Ummah's view should be represented. That they wanted a Khalifa who will not change the previous opinion. Uthman accepted and he was given the bay'ah. So it shows the permissibility of doing that. Okay. Yes. Yes, you can ask.
The Shias, they say that Imam Ali
yes,
he basically adopted this principle, and that is why he did not dispute the election of Abu Bakr.
He adopted which principle?
The principle of basically giving up this strongest opinion in favor of the unity of the Muslims.
If they say that, then fine. Then we have no problems like the Zaydis. Yeah, they are let's say, one of the schools within the Shia that we don't have much problem with. Because the Zaydis do not attack the Sahaba, they do not condemn the Sahaba, they only have a political opinion that it would have been better if Ali radiallahu anh was the Khalifa after Abu Bakr. That's it. They don't reject Abu Bakr as the Khalifa, no Umar, no Uthman. But the Imamiyya Shia, the Shia who follow the Ithna Shariah, they follow the 12 Imams, they reject many of them. So they say Abu Bakr was not the Khalifa, he manipulated the power. And Ali was subdued. And he was not able to fight. And this and that, they make up stories then. Right? So it wasn't that they just say, well, he accepted for the sake of unity. Then fair enough, that means he accepted Abu Bakr as the legitimate Khalifa. He gave the bay'ah, that means but they do not say that. The ones who dispute, they say, no, Abu Bakr is not the Khalif. Umar is not the Khalif. Uthman is not the Khalif. Only the Imam after the Prophet is Ali. And after Ali is Hassan and Hussein. So they have problems actually with this issue. So, their argument is false. These are some examples. I'll maybe give some more examples later. We can take some questions. Yes.
When Ali was offered this job,
yes.
was asked these questions by
yes.
and the opinion of
Abu Bakr and Umar. Yes.
If the opinion of Abu Bakr and Umar were right, Then why he said, no, I will not go by their opinion?
Good question. That's why we need to understand the subject of ijtihad and the ra'i of Sahaba. That the opinion of Abu Bakr as a scholar, as what we call a mujtahid, the one who can extract a rule, he's an individual. Like Rasulullah said, the one who makes ijtihad, if he hits the mark, he gets 2 rewards. If he misses, he gets 1 reward. So every mujtahid has his own opinion. Okay? It may match with Abu Bakr's, it may not. And on some issues, there will be opposing views. For example, Umar himself opposed Abu Bakr on divorce and upon the distribution of zakah and many other things. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar, they had an argument about the issue of divorce, that if you make divorce in one sitting, although it is not allowed to do it, but if somebody does it, will it be valid? Will the divorce be completed? And one of them said yes, it will. The other one said no. Okay? So when one was Khalifa, he implemented his view. When the other became Khalifa, he implemented his view. Right? So ijtihad is an extraction from the Quran and Sunnah. The individual opinion of a Sahaba is not a dalil. Is not an evidence. The Ijma, the consensus of the Sahaba is a dalil, not the individual opinion. So Ali here, he is saying, I am a mujtahid, I am a scholar. I am not going to, he was very independent in his minded. I will not accept and just follow Abu Bakr and Umar's opinion. I will myself follow what I am confident of. You see the point? So, and that is a full right of a mujtahid, and that's a full right of the Khalifa to do that. In principle, because he can say, no, I will follow my own opinions. I will look to the text directly, and that in fact is better. Okay? That somebody studies the text directly and extracts the hukm. So both are permitted, for the sake of unity here, because normally, for Uthman to leave his opinion, what he is saying is that I am going to leave my opinions and follow Abu Bakr and Umar's. Normally, if we did not have this dalil, it would be haram. If for a mujtahid to leave his opinion and follow another mujtahid without being convinced of the other mujtahid's view, it's haram to do that. Because you are convinced what you are following is the hukam of Allah. And you see the other opinion as weak, as not the hukam of Allah. How can then you just leave your opinion and follow that? It would be haram normally. It is haram for mujtahid to leave his opinion. You need dalil to prove that when is he allowed. There are some circumstances when he is allowed to leave his opinion for the sake of another. One of that is that, for example, if there is a Khalifa and he adopts, like Abu Bakr adopted, Umar left his opinion and implemented Abu Bakr's. Amr al-Imam yarfa'ul khilaf. The order of the Imam solves the difference. That's one way that you can leave your opinion for another. Another way is for the sake of unity. Okay? And another way is when we prove it by a qaida in usul, what we call ma la yatimul wajib illa bihi fahuwa wajib. Whatever the wajib cannot be established without is wajib. For example, today in order to revive the ummah, an Islamic group needs to be unified. Like for example, a hizb or a jama'ah which is working for khilafah, it has to be unified itself. It can't unify the ummah if it's not unified. So therefore the scholars within that group, the mujtahids, have to leave their opinion for the sake of the opinion of the Amir, if they are not convinced. Because at the end of the day, it's Islamic. At the end of the day, it has shubhat dalil. It has a basis of an evidence. Okay, so therefore, we have to accept. So that's why Ali here, he said, it's a very good question. That he said, that yes, I will not prefer to do that because he has a right as a Khalifa. Okay, so this incident, again, is a example of Ijma. Yeah. There are some others I will go into in other areas, but let's take other questions first. Yes.
And, regarding the Umar's establishment of the Tarawih.
Yes.
So, what the Zahir schools say that Prophet prayed only 8 rakah.
Yes. Yes.
So, what's that? Is that definitive? These
I see, again, we have to realize something. If something is definite in the deen, it can never be disputed. So the fact that it is disputed in the scholars, okay, it's not something definitive in the first place. So it is sahih, yes. But the meaning is not clear. The meaning is not qat'i. Was it tarawih or was it tahajjud? Okay? So this is disputed. Right? Similarly, it's not definite that Omar, his issue first is not narrated in a definite way. Right? That it was definite ijma, that all the Sahaba definitively accepted throughout their entire life to make Tarawih for 20. That is not definite. Umar made it, and it looks like the Sahaba consented. But for example, the Malikis, for them they make 37 rak'ah. Yeah? Because they say ijma of the people of Medina. So they look at the actions of the people of Medina, and the people of Medina used to pray later on in the time of Malik, they used to pray more than 20. This is the issue. So here it's not a definite area. It's an area of ikhtilaf. So we follow what opinion we believe to be the strongest.
What's the better actually? Now, hadith is also not definite.
Yes.
Ijma Sahaba is not also definite.
Yes.
So
you need now. That's why it needs a mujtahid to make tarjih. So you need to outweigh. So now, when we look later on, when we study more advanced in Usul-ul-fiqh, if you have two conflicting texts, then how do you outweigh between them? Okay, like you have a hadith, then you have ijma. Yes, the sunnah, we look to it after the Quran. However, if something is not explicit, so here it is vague actually in the hadith, it is not saying it's Tarawih, and you have something explicit in the ijma, many scholars outweigh that above the sunnah, because they say now the ijma is indicating, okay, something that they knew and it was clear that it is Tarawih. Okay, so this is where people debate the matter, right? Other scholars, they will outweigh and say no, the sunnah should be taken as priority over the ijma, and they will interpret the text basically, and they will take their interpretation over the ijma. So here this is, and they will say that is a ra'i of Umar. They will not consider it as ijma, because if they consider it as ijma, then that means that their argument is failed. So the Zahiris don't consider it as a ijma. They say it's opinion of Umar.
But then how could the others stop?
Yeah, but again, it's not tawatur in narration. So how do we know no Sahabi ever disputed? Yes, it's true in the narration no one disputed. But how do we know for the rest of everyone's life no one disputed? You see the issue? So it's not a clear-cut thing. So that's why these types of things are subject to areas of ikhtilaf within the scholars, okay? Another area, or another example, maybe just to give to increase our understanding of Ijma Sahaba, is the permissibility of accepting wealth from the kuffar, which they have earned in a haram way, okay? So, somebody may say, well, how can I work for a company, but the non-Muslim owner of that company, he has many companies, and some of his earning is from haram. Okay? And he is paying me wages from that money which is haram. So we have a dalil which is from Ijma. At the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, we know that the kuffar, the Christians, when they came under the authority of the Islamic State, they sold pigs, pork amongst themselves to other Christians, took the money and gave it as jizya. And Umar radiallahu anh accepted that. Okay? So this is an evidence. In fact, from this evidence is one of the evidence that a principle is extracted. That the non-Muslims, although in principle, everything they do is invalid in principle because they're not obeying Allah. However, you treat them as if it's valid. And they are disobeying Allah and everything because they don't worship Allah. They are, following their own religions, their own ideas. But you treat them, okay, as if they are valid. So this is a broad principle that allows us, for example, PLC company structures, public limited companies in Islam are haram, and they are invalid types of companies, what you call stock market companies, okay? But we can deal with the ones which are not Muslim because we are not liable for the way that they are dealing and setting up their companies. We treat them as if they are legitimate. But if it is a Muslim owned, then we cannot. Why? Because they are illegitimate by Shariah. They have no existence. So therefore we can't help them in the haram. So if a Muslim PLC is there, we can't deal with them. But if it is non-Muslim, like in this country, we have no problem. But in countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, the brothers have problems. They have to verify which companies they are dealing with. Companies which are Muslim PLCs, they have to be careful not to deal with them. And they can deal with them only then through third parties. I.e., if you're dealing with an agent who is buying something from a PLC, then you are dealing your contract with the agent, not with that, or with a third party, another person. So that's something else altogether. So anyway, this is another example of ijma. Maybe another example, just to elaborate. I have mentioned it previously in one of the previous sessions regarding the Umari treaty. The treaty with Umar radiallahu anhu, when he entered Al-Quds and he signed a treaty with the Christians. In that treaty, he prohibited the Jews from living within Jerusalem. In origin, the dhimmis, the non-Muslim citizens of the Islamic State, they can live anywhere. Right? They can live anywhere in principle, apart from specific, like in Mecca and so on, we have specific texts. In Hijaz, they cannot live. Two deens cannot exist in Hijaz, like the Prophet said. But let's say in general, the other parts of the state, they can live in there. The Jews, they can live. However, Umar in this treaty, he accepted, and many Sahaba were witness to that, and some even signed that, Amr ibn al-As, etc. So, he accepted that the Jews cannot live within the city of Jerusalem. And the Sahaba, many of them were in that army who came with Umar. And they all knew and they all accepted. Therefore, it is ijma that the Jews are not allowed to reside within the city of Jerusalem. Okay? So, this is another example of ijma Sahaba, which we can derive hukam from. Like today, they have overtaken that land. They are not even allowed to live there. They can live in Palestine, but not in Jerusalem. Okay?
No.
Yes.
Ijma, does it definitely mean that there is something missing which the Sahabas have not transmitted?
Well, not necessarily. We can say there is.
It could be.
Yeah, there can be a supportive ijma. So, like for the permissibility of taqleed. Okay, scholars use the Quran and the Sunnah and ijma. So here they are using ijma Sahaba as a supportive evidence. Okay, because some people, like the current day Zahiris, say taqleed is haram. So they say that for you to follow a scholar is haram. Now, if the Sahaba consented unanimously on following each other, how can you say taqleed is haram? You see, it disproves them, as well as you try and disprove from the Sunnah and from the Quran. So we can use ijma Sahaba as a supportive dalil, but if it is used as the basis of hukum, not as a supportive dalil, then it is an indication that there is something which was not reported in the Sunnah. It is an indication of
Tarawiyah.
Yes.
Umar he says it's bid'ah, but it is hasana, which means that he has not heard of this thing from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or else he wouldn't have said it is bid'ah. The reason he said it was because people are leaving this, and I do not want them to leave this.
Yeah, again, but this is that when we go to the counter arguments of the people who try to counter the issue, they narrate certain things like this, yeah. But they are not necessarily, they are disputed. They are not necessarily.
This thing is disputed.
Yes. So it's not necessarily that he is saying it's bid'ah hasana. Others say it's ijma. So ones who say it's not ijma, they use this narration. Yeah. So they say. Yes. Yeah, people may say that, but I have got an article which goes into that matter in depth of Taraweeh. And in fact, it's not really a strong point. Okay. It's a disputed thing that they raise. Yes.
What about following the Ijma? Actually, once his father,
Yes.
one of the Imams of the Masjid, he died.
Yes.
It was around Asad time.
Yes.
Very renowned in the whole town. So what they did is, his brother, the Mufti, he told that we should bury him.
Yes.
But the Jamaat Islam people came, and they argued that no, we have something in the history of Islam that we can wait. So they want all the people from all the villages and all the adjoining towns to come and collectively offer the namaz janazah. So they waited, and then next morning they buried it. Giving this dalil.
Yeah, but that dalil is only for appointment of Khalifa. That delayal was for an obligation which is more obligatory. You see the point here. So this cannot be used. This is a misinterpretation of the text. The burial of the dead, it should be quick, not for other than a Shari'i reason. Shari'i reason as an example, appointment of the Khalifa, or for example, if it's a time of fitna. So Ali radiallahu anh, his appointment as Khalifa was 5 days. Okay, why? Because it was a time of fitna. Uthman had been assassinated. And it was a turmoil. They could not even elect the Khalifa, although they tried to. So the here is that there needs to be a permission, or there needs to be an evidence from Shariah, and just for relatives to come is not an evidence.
So what reason they cited actually was that since it was very influential, so they cited that reason that the people from the adjoining villages and towns will come the next day, and they will become furious.
That is all.
Create the chaos and confusion.
That's just made up from the mind. It is not a dalil. Saying all the people will like to come, or they will be happy to come, or something. That's not an evidence. And you cannot correlate it with the dalil of appointing a Khalifa, which will be able to administer and rule the people by Islam, isn't it? So it's no comparison. So it's a wrong argument actually. That argument, they should not have done that. Okay? Yes. Yes. Yes.
Most of their lives they have been going to the Shariah and all these things, and so he really explained to them the issue of rich and strong things.
Yes.
They almost get emotional and they think, almost reject him.
Yes.
Without understanding the basis and what the why difference exists. So, how do you feel explain that?
Discussed last time in the section of Ilm al-Hadith that when we follow the hadiths are in different categories. So the hadith which is sahih and the hadith which is hasan, they are acceptable as evidence when we are taking laws, okay? Because we know that they are from Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But a hadith which is da'if, although it is reported, da'if by definition means that it is weak. Narration, it has a problem in the chain, and we talked about the 7 types of da'if. That, for example, the person, he is known for inaccuracy. There is a break in the chain. He doesn't know who he heard it from. So many problems are there. Okay, so that is not considered as a basis to take ahkam from. So the scholars generally, for example, the scholars of the madhahib, they don't accept da'if hadith as a basis of extracting rules. Okay, to say that we can extract a hukm of Allah for that, because the hadith has no basis. That's the first issue. So therefore, we today, many things have become popularized. They've become common custom, which are not necessarily from the authentic text. They are from da'if, like Shab Barat. There is one narration, or there is a narration reported by Tirmidhi, and even Tirmidhi himself, Imam Tirmidhi himself, when he was reporting that, if you read Tirmidhi, he writes after the narration, he says, and this is considered da'if by Imam Bukhari. This is considered a weak narration. Okay? By al-Bukhari. And Bukhari is considered the best of the authenticators in hadith. So here, even in his narration, he has mentioned it. Just after narrating it. Because he is just collecting and compiling. Right? So the issue here is then, if it is a da'if hadith, then how can we base our action on it? And how can we make it a big issue that they have made it today? Shab Barat, it's like a huge thing. Okay? So therefore we say, those who follow it, they are following an evidence, but it is weak, and therefore it's a very weak opinion. Because there are some scholars like Ghazali and others who say that if there is a hadith, even if it is da'if, if it does not go against anything established in the deen, and if it encourages people to do good deeds, then khair, we can use it to motivate them. However, it should not be the basis, and it could not be made as a big massive thing. So they can say we can use it to motivate. So what they would say, those scholars, is that khair, it is there, so it's good, you can do good deeds. But they will not say, yes, your previous sins of that year will be forgiven, and this and sometimes their view of it even contradicts Quran. The taqdeer will be written, that contradicts Quran. That is not written on that day. Okay, that's something which is when you are in the womb. That's something, it's in Lawh al-Mahfuz. It's not. It's already written. Allah wrote it before the beginning of the universe. Anyway, right? So that even conflicts with Quran. But they have made up all these things about it. Oh, this will happen. So we have to be careful in that. If we are, in origin, we as Muslims are obliged to worship Allah directly. Okay. it is only because we are unable to extract the rules from the evidences ourselves that we are permitted to follow scholars. It's only because of that. And therefore though, still the path that we should follow is the path of truth and the path of knowledge. Not the path that says, I am following my Imam regardless. If he says turn left, I'll turn left. If he says turn right, I'll turn right. Regardless of what he's where he's taking me. That is absolute blind following in the deen, and that's where our brothers like from the Salafis and the Zahiris attack that, which is a true criticism, because then you can lose the whole deen. Like the Imam today, he says riba is halal, so people say, oh very good, Imam says riba is halal. That's not acceptable. Yes. 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 See, we have to understand something about the history of the Muslims. We are not living in the time of the Sahaba where knowledge is widespread. We're living in a time of ignorance. We're living in a time where, like the Prophet said, the death of learned men will lead to the decrease of knowledge. Okay, it's reported in Bukhari, and that will continue in the society, i.e. people, and they will give fatwa from the minds and they will lead themselves and other people astray. Okay, so this is the time we are in today. That today we're not in a time of knowledge. People have become used to following traditions. For example, in the whole of India, everyone follows dowry. Is that from Islam? The Muslims, they all follow dowry. That the man must give, the woman must give the man money to get married. All the Muslims follow that. Is it from Islam? It contradicts Islam. In Islam you have mahar. Doesn't mean it's right. Allah Himself said in the Quran, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And the majority of mankind, they know nothing. We don't follow majority, we don't follow tradition, we don't follow, in our time, our custom, our people, our norms. Because norms and times and customs and values change. Those things are not a dalil. Okay, they're not evidence. For example, if from society to society, the customs change. Isn't it? And the norms change. So in certain countries, certain things are normal. And in other countries, certain things are not. Doesn't mean that is an evidence. Because that just become used, they are used to that. Okay, they are used to that. So this is, for example, in India, or not in India, in the Arab world, if you go to someone and you bow to them, or you put your, like the Hindus do, they put your hand on the floor to your parents, they will see that as haram. Okay? And they will see as a great thing. How can you do bow to a Muslim? And you are a Muslim, you only bow to Allah and all these things. They'll probably be very bad to you. But in Bangladesh and in India, it's a custom, even amongst the Muslims. It's just customs. So it's not necessarily the case that it is true. So it can be, for example, in India, we had a spread of Sufism. And within Sufism, they use Daif Hadith, for example, to encourage people. And that led to people, for example, when you go to Nizamuddin or all these, you go to Moinuddin Chisti and all that, you see people kissing the grave, bowing to the grave. Now those early scholars didn't say that. Yeah, what they said was something else, but because of the prevalence of ignorance, it's become worse and worse and worse and worse, that now people just do anything. And they're thinking they're following their imams and scholars. So we have to be very careful. Certain practices have become into the practice of the Muslims here, and they're not based on evidence, or they're not based on strong evidence. So we as Muslims, we go back, that's why we study usul, we go back to the sources of law. We don't go to the practice of people. Okay, any questions about Ijma? You said you had questions earlier.
Regarding this
Yes.
same kind of thing, like yesterday,
Yes.
Miladun Nabi.
Yes.
So if Imam Ghazali Rahimahullah has said that if people want to follow a weak opinion also, Zaif Hadith,
Yes.
but they want to do some good deeds which is not against the Shariah, so
Yes.
let them.
Yes.
So again in this case, in case of Milad,
Yes.
so that day what people gather, they just people gather, and if some seerah is discussed and all that. So that.
See, the problem here is that at the same time Rasulullah talked about the concept of bid'ah, innovation. So he said that every innovation is dalala, is a misguidance. and وَكُلُّ ضَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ, and every misguidance is in the hellfire. So here there is a concept of bid'ah. Now what is bid'ah? What is innovation? Innovation in the religion, what Rasulullah, he is not talking about technology. He's not talking about making a new type of phone or a new type of computer. He's talking about bid'ah in the religion. Okay, and innovation in the religion. Now innovation in the religion means what? Innovation in ritual part, the ritual part of the religion. Okay, in principle. So if you want to worship Allah and you are inventing something, okay, and without a dalil, if you have a dalil, for example, people use a dalil. Rasulullah once after Salah, he was looking at one of the companions pray, or some of the companions pray, and he asked, them, who has made some special dua, or who has made something? And one of the companions said, I have. When he came up and he said, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd, he said, Hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan alayhi wa mubarakan fi. He said from himself. So he made that dua himself. And Rasulullah said, I saw the angels shower the blessings of Allah upon you. So here, it is an evidence that in dua, we are allowed to invent our own du'as. Okay? Because we have a dalil for that. Now, we cannot extend that to something which was not done by the Prophet, it was not done by the Sahaba, like the celebration of the birthday of Rasulullah, okay, as a celebration and making it as part of the religion, okay, and saying that we are celebrating and we get ajr and reward. That's a bid'ah because you're inventing something which is not based on text. But if you say, on this day we will simply remember, like on anniversary of destruction of Khilafah, we are remembering destruction of Khilafah. On this day we will remember Rasulullah. Okay. That's not a problem. And nobody says that's a problem. The problem is making it into a festival. And at the same time the Prophet said, we only have two festivals, the people of Islam. Okay, the two Eids, that's it. So now we contradict text if we invent other festivals. Yeah.
Khilafah, you have only 2 holidays.
Well, 2 festivals, yani. Holidays may be allowed by the Khalifa for other reasons. But official, yes. Official Islamic holidays. They can be ones which are for practicality. Within the area of Mubah, for example. To give people a break, school holiday or something.
Earlier talked about when for example, say Facebook or any Jamaat is moving for the establishment of Khilafah. So the people who are within the Jamaat, they can agree upon something which leads, even if they differ among themselves, but for sake of unity, they will just agree on that as a consensus. But say, so we have not many sects. Say we have Bareilly and others.
Yes.
But the actual thing they are based upon.
Yeah, it's not a sect, I will explain that anyway.
And their thought is that they are following the Zaif kind of thing.
Yes.
So can a consensus be made on that for sake of unity?
Right. See, the issue of for the sake of unity is not as simple as just for the sake of any type of unity. There's conditions in the Shariah. So I mentioned the principle, مَا لَا يُتِمُّ الْوَاجِبْ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ وَاجِبْ. Whatever the wajib cannot be established without is itself wajib. Okay? So, in terms of a group, in order to revive the ummah and re-establish the khilafah and to make the ummah move forward, that group must be unified on certain matters, not on all matters. It has to be unified in its objective, in its methodology, and in those matters related to the resumption of Islam, i.e., what will be the ruling system of the khilafah, what will be its constitution, what will be its economic system, what will be its judiciary. It has to have some unity. If the scholars, they are all, one scholar saying the Khalifa has to be from Quraysh, which is an Islamic opinion, and the other one saying no, he does not have to be. Then you have disunity in the group. When people ask, you don't have an answer. So you have to unify upon certain issues. But for example, in ibadah, you don't have to. So in the Hizb or in other groups, you don't unify on the furu matters. Why do you have to be unified on these? You don't. In fact, let Muslims adopt whatever is valid. Whatever is valid. Okay? So they can adopt from any school of thought as long as it's an Islamic opinion in these other areas which are not related to the objective. Okay. The other issue to realize is that it is true that the group should not accept opinions which are contradictory to Islam. So like you said that certain groups which are, it's better not to call them sects, we can say they are groups, because sects are upon Aqidah. When Rasulullah said there will be 73 firqas, sects, and one of them will be on the right path, and that is the people who follow me. This hadith is to do with firqas, because the Prophet has condemned all of them to hell. He's saying all of them in the fire, which means that all of them are kuffar. So which means Qadianis, the Ismailis, the Bohras, and all of those other sects. So in Islam, when we say sect, firqa, we normally mean in Aqidah, the deviants in belief. We don't call Brelvis or Wahhabis or whoever firqas, we call them groups, because they're all Muslim at the end of the day, even if some are sinful, but they are not a firqa. So now it is true that an Islamic group cannot adopt an opinion which contradicts something definitive in Islam, or which is something clear-cut as a bid'ah in Islam. So that would be a corruption. So for the sake of unity, you can't make halal haram. So you can't say something which they, like in some of these groups, they go into. Like cursing the Sahaba, like the Shia. The Shia, many of them are Muslim, but they curse the Sahaba, which is haram. So we cannot accept that. So we can't say within the group, we will have Shia, and we allow them to curse the Sahaba. No. They can be Shia in certain things, but they cannot curse the Sahaba. So they have to leave all those aspects of their, even if they come from Shia background or from Barelvi background, they have to leave those aspects which are from bid'ah, which are from against Islam. Or if they consider the Imams are infallible, they cannot make mistake, which contradicts Islam. In fact, that's an addition to Islam, which is not a firqa, because it doesn't go against fundamentals of Iman, but it is an innovation in the deen. So it's a sin. Or if they say you can go and bow to the grave of whatever, Nizamuddin, in Nizamuddin, that is haram. They have to leave all those opinions which are against Islam and then follow a Islamic opinion.
But doesn't that lead to that false opinion?
What?
They are saying, say, Awliya can gather partners.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So they have to leave all those things. It can even lead to problems in Aqidah. It can. Not necessarily. Like most of them, they are jahil. They are ignorant, so they don't know. So it's not. We can't say that they are disbelievers, but they are ignorant. For example, why does the man, when he goes to the grave and he bows to it, why is he doing that? It's not that he's worshipping the one. His scholar has told him that this man in the grave, he's awliya of Allah. Therefore, he can intercede for you. And that scholar is using a dalil that don't say that the shaheed is dead, that they are living. They are with Allah. So see, the living man, you can go and ask him dua. So if the living man, you can ask him dua. What about the awliya of Allah? They're also living, metaphorically, or living in a certain sense. So you can ask them. So they manipulate text, and it started off like that. You can go and ask them dua. Then later on they said you can go and he can help you. So now the man who is going, he is just deviated. He is not believing that man is the same power, has power of Allah. If he does that shit, then he is a disbeliever. But most of them just ignorant. They don't know what they're doing. Okay? So it's better to say they are in sin. They are not apostates. They are still Muslims. But they are in sin. Because they are ignorant. So, of course, we have to get rid of those things. An Islamic group has to get rid of from its people. It has to make them Islamic personalities. This means all their actions must emanate from Islam. That cannot have all these other innovations and other things involved in that. Yeah?
This question was posed by one of the brothers that
Yes.
when I told him about this thing. So
Yes.
he questioned that, say, more of Khilafah is given, say, Khilafah.
Yes.
Say, he took the example of Kashmir.
Yes.
And he told that, but you should have some force, some kind of army who are strong in belief. Because if tomorrow you are saying to these Barelis, say, worshipping in this Astan and all that, this haram,
Yes.
they will revolt.
Yes.
They will just burn down everything. So you should have some number of...
That's not necessarily true. Yani. We have to understand this argument is not necessarily true. Because in history, we've always had many groups living under a Khalifa. Okay, even the Shia, although in some periods they created rebellion, but in general, like the Ottoman period was 800 years, there was no real rebellion. Okay, So we have to understand that the Amr of the Khalifa, there's certain qawaid, principles which all the schools of thought accept. Amr al-Imam yarfa'u al-khilaf. Amr al-Imam nafizan zahiran wa batinan. The order of the Imam, it is established openly and secretly. Okay, it solves the disputes. So the Khalifa of the Muslims, he in the areas of ikhtilaf, if there is an area of ikhtilaf which needs for him to adopt, then he will adopt in that. Okay, and if there is areas of ignorance, okay, for example, it is true at the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, when he went to Iraq, when he changed the capital to Kufa, there were certain people who started to worship him because he's the ruler. They were used to worshipping the emperors and the rulers. So he got them and killed them. Okay, we made a ditch and burnt them. So we have to understand that there will be in all time weird people. But the Islamic State has to solve this. It needs to, you are right, it needs a group. That's why that group must be purified and strong. And that group must culture the ummah. And when the Khilafah is there, then that group's work is easier. And the Khilafah itself will, through its education, through its media, through various different styles, promote the correct thoughts of Islam and try to purify the society so that all these weird things become abolished. Okay? I'll give you an example. In Saudi, although they are extreme in this. Like they have destroyed all the sites of the Sahaba, which the Khulafa had preserved for 1,000 years. For over 1,000 years. They destroyed the Khandaq, the ditch. Rasulullah ﷺ, one part of the ditch where the boulder was there when the Prophet, the sparks of prophecy, is called the Hadith. That was preserved by the Khulafa. Until the Ottoman period, the Saudis destroyed, they have made that they have filled it with cement. They have made a courtyard of Banu Sa'idah where the Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was elected as a car park. At the same time, those places where Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's rebellion and Al-Saud later on fought against the Khilafah, they have decorated with flowers. And everyone's shop has to have a photo of the king. So they are saying that is bid'ah and this is not. And you see, they have gone to a corruption in this thing. Yeah, they have gone to an extreme. But just to prove the point here, like, can the Brahmavis revolt in Saudi? They can't. When you have an authority, you can't do anything. You see the point here? They go there, they make Hajj, but they can't revolt because there is an authority against them. So at the end of the day, the Saudis are too extreme in that because they have a weird idea. But the issue is that if there is a strong authority which is established in a strong way, then people come in line eventually. Yeah, people actually become influenced by that environment.
Traditionally, you'll be doing the work.
Yeah, dawah, culturing, and all those things. Yes.
Again, regarding this Rahman Wahab.
Yes.
Not
Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Yes.
But actually, I heard from my friend that he was some scholar.
Yes.
So when people were involved in that, all kind of Islam and all that.
Yes.
Then he gave an opinion to the Khalifa of that time. So as a scholar, he didn't do things.
Yeah, he was a scholar, that's true.
But the followers...
well, it's the history, we will not go into it now. He was a scholar, he had his own opinions. Like he said, it's haram to visit the graveyards. Even though the Prophet said, as we discussed last time, I told you not to visit the graves, but you can't visit them now. But he felt that these practices, Muslims got involved in Sufism and all that. He went to an extreme in that, okay? And he said that is shirk in absolute sense. And he did not only advise the Khalifa, he rebelled. He had an armed rebellion against the Khalifa. That's where he went wrong. Because at the end of the day, you have your opinion, but the Khalifa is a Muslim. You cannot rebel physically and fight against him. Now, although he was sincere, we're not saying he was a corrupt man. His followers later on, because he was in the 1700s, his followers later on used his madhab, his school of thought, and then used that and manipulated that in order to support the effort of the British against the Ottomans in order to establish their own authority. And this was what the family of Al-Saud and Sharif Hussain. So that's true. But he himself was a scholar and he is sincere. But he just made mistakes in his interpretation. Okay? Any other questions on Ijma of Sahaba? Khair, we can carry on. Yes. With knowledge. If they reject it with knowledge, yes, then yes. So if somebody was to know that the concept of ijma is from Quran and it's definite in Islam, and they say, yeah, I don't care, I don't believe in that. With knowledge, that's like the rejection of the Sunnah, and it's the rejection of those ayat, it's the rejection of the concept which is established by the Quran. So this is something which would lead to apostasy if somebody did that with knowledge. However, if they did out of ignorance, for example, they don't know, they say, oh, only Quran and Sunnah is there, we don't accept ijma, then they are sinful, because then you are rejecting the Quran. Because the concept of ijma Sahaba is qat'i, definitive. Allah has praised them as a group, collectively. And secondly, they are the ones who compiled the Quran. So to reject the ijma means that there will be a dhan in the aqidah, a doubt in the aqidah, that the Quran could be. Rejecting the ijma is saying that they can collectively make a mistake. That's what, or collectively can be on error, or on something which is non-Islamic. Yes. Not opinion. See, that's why I said earlier, it's not an opinion. So it's not an opinion. It's not a individual opinion. It's the consensus of all the companions. Okay, that to reject the consensus as a dalil. So let's think about the concept intellectually. To reject it as an evidence, yeah, then would be a source of doubt in Quran. Because rejecting as an evidence means that it can be subject to doubt. Because why would you reject it as an evidence? You will say, well, they can make mistakes. That's what the argument is. Either you accept it or you don't. If you don't accept it, then you're saying that they can make mistakes as a collective. If they can make mistakes as a collective, then again the Quran could be doubtful, which is impossible. So you can't reject the consensus of a companion. You can reject the individual opinion of a companion, fine. Yeah? It's like, for example, mutawatir. If somebody says, yeah, I like the narrators, I accept the narrators, but I don't accept the mutawatir as a concept, that it leads to definite truth. Then what does that lead to? Why would somebody, if they reject the concept of mutawatir leading to definite truth, then that's a rejection of Quran, because the Quran is reported by mutawatir. Like Ahle Quran. Ahle Quran saying, we accept the Quran, but not the Hadith. Why are they kuffar? Because they are rejecting the Hadith, which in itself is a rejection of Quran. By rejecting Hadith mutawatir, you are rejecting those ayat telling you to follow the Prophet. By definition. So by rejecting the Sahaba's consensus, you are rejecting those ayat saying about the protection of the Quran and those ayat praising the Sahaba as a collective. Because Allah can't praise the Sahaba as a collective if as a collective they were on error. And error here means sin. It means either there's only two sides in Islam, haq and batil. Either or is they on haq or on batil. If they're on haq, then that's fine. But if they are not, then they are on batil. Yeah? So that's why, in principle. However, there may be some people who do not reject the concept of ijma of the Sahaba, but they may specify their own opinion of who is a Sahabi. That is subject to difference. So some people, they will say, like the Shia, they don't reject concept of Sahaba, but they say Ijma Ahlul Bayt, those who they consider as Sahabi. Okay? Or other scholars which we go into here, we can go into it. The definition, who is a Sahabi? So there are two definitions. One is that any Muslim who saw Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and two is a Muslim who lived with the Prophet, who has gone for 1 or 2 years, or stayed with him, or participated in 1 or 2 ghazawat wars with the Prophet. Okay. Now there are two definitions. Now, how is the second definition extracted? It is extracted from the meaning of the term Sahaba. Okay. Sahaba comes from the term Suhuba. Suhuba comes from the term companionship. So when Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, these are my companions, or when he talked about whoever abuses one of my companions, he will be like this. Companions as a term is in the language, so we have to go to the linguistic meaning. The linguistic meaning is suhbah. For example, I know you, but you are not my companion. I know you, you're my friend, but suhbah, companionship, means more than the one who is just an acquaintance. It's somebody who stays with you, he's very close with you, who lives with you, who fights with you, you understand, and who knows your innermost thoughts. That's a companion. So that's why the scholars of the Tabi'een, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, rahimahullah, one of the greatest scholars of the Tabi'een, he defined this definition of companion. So he said, it is essential that someone has a companionship with the Prophet for 1 or 2 years, who has gone out with him of 1 or 2 battles. Meaning he has lived with the Prophet, he has fought with him, he has been with him. He is not just someone who saw the Prophet and then went to another city. Okay? Also we have Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, who narrated that one of the Tabi'een said, I said to Anas, are there any of the companions of the Messenger of Allah left other than you? You have to remember, Anas was very young in Medina when the Prophet came. And he was given by his mother as a servant to Rasulullah. Okay? So he was a very young boy, and he outlived everyone from the companions. So he was asked, is there anyone from the companions? He said, there are still many Arabs who saw him, but as for the companions, no. So he understood what is the companion of the Prophet and who are the people who just saw the Prophet. That there is a distinction between those two things. And one of the scholars in Islamic history, he said, we do not mean by the Sahaba, al-Mazin, he said, we do not mean the Sahaba, those who met him for a day or two, or those who attended him for some business and then left. We mean those who followed him, helped him, were guided by the light, and Allah revealed to him, those are the ones who attain felicity. So, this is the meaning here, that the stronger opinion is that the Sahaba are those who are the actual companions of the Prophet, not those who just met him and saw him and that's it, for 1 or 2 days. There are some scholars who say anyone who saw the Prophet is a companion. That is an opinion, fair enough, because they are taking the meaning literally, okay, that those present in the time of the Prophet, that generation of the Prophet. But that is a weak opinion, okay. It's not necessarily. That's why, for example, many people don't consider Yazid as from the companion. That is a strong opinion. Because Yazid, yes, he saw the Prophet, he was a young boy, but he was not a companion of the Prophet. Okay? So that's why, Muawiyah again is disputed. Some say it fits the description of Suhbah because he was a scribe of the Prophet, he was the brother-in-law of the Prophet. His Muawiyah's sister was married to Rasulullah, this daughter of Abu Sufyan. Okay, so they say it fits. Other scholars say no, because he did not spend enough time. Okay, with Rasulullah. So it's an area of ikhtilaf. Okay, but Yazid, it's a clearer thing. Yazid didn't spend any time with the Prophet. Okay, so the second definition would exclude Yazid. Okay, that he is not a companion, although he saw the Prophet. The first definition would include him. So here, these are areas where there are differences.
When they refer to Muawiyah,
yes,
they did not put that with the braces.
Yeah, that's why, because some scholars don't consider him as a companion. Yeah, maybe they don't consider. They don't say they consider him as a narrator, but not necessarily as a companion. So they may not put radiallahu anhu or whatever. So it is something which is ikhtilafi. There are different views. It doesn't exclude him from error as an individual.
Because Imam Ali he burned people twice.
Yes.
As a punishment.
Yes.
Again,
Yeah. Later on, he was told of the hadith by Ibn Abbas. He didn't know. Yes, actually, Ibn Abbas said to him that I have heard Rasulullah say, "Do not punish with the punishment of Allah." So then he stopped from doing that because he didn't know of the dalil, obviously. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can end. Maybe we will stop on this section. Instead of going into qiyas. Because qiyas is a long discussion, so we'll carry on next week into that whole chapter.
It's more works
Yes. Yes. Yes, that's right. So they are, the primary way it is used in extraction of law is that obviously you look to Quran and Sunnah first, then to Ijma as a source, all the incidences to see what occurred in the time of the companions. So that's how it works primarily. However, it is used as a supportive evidence. For example, the Qadianis, they argue the ayah in the Quran which talks about Rasul as the seal of the prophets. It's zanni in meaning. In Arabic, it can also mean the best of the prophets. And that is true. That's why if you've argued with the Qadianis who are deep in their argument, the most of the Muslims who don't understand usul can get derailed. Yeah? They can get messed up. So they say that it means the seal. It means in Arabic also the best of the prophets. So it doesn't necessarily mean the last of the prophets. So how do we refute? So when we refute that, we refute it by mutawatir, that it's mutawatir, Rasul Sallallahu is the last of the prophets. So the meaning of that ayah is confirmed by the mutawatir narration. Secondly, it's by Ijma Sahaba. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq fought all those who claim prophethood after the prophet. And that's definitive Ijma. Okay? So it's used by the scholars as a supportive argument. We could just say it's mutawatir, the prophet is the last prophet. But it is used on top of that. How come the companions fought all those like Musaylim al-Qazzab, Shuja' and Tulayh al-Asdi and Aswad al-Ansi and the false prophets who came out. So that means prophethood has ended. Okay? So here it refutes their whole nonsense. Yeah? So yes, it is used. And in Ijma there are sometimes there's some subdivision, like there's something called Ijma as-Sakuti, the silent Ijma. Okay? For example, something occurs and the Sahaba are just silent. So it's something with Ijma as-Sakuti, it's silent. Sometimes it may be more explicit. Okay, like Omar's statement about something and then the Sahaba accept it. Yeah? So it is something that there are some sub-classifications within. No, but they are silent upon what? They are silent upon that they are valid ijtihadat. The fact that they differ, you cannot have any conflict within the wahi of Allah. So you can't have two definitive ayat which are definite in meaning conflicting. One will abrogate the other either, or one will, you can't have conflict within the source. So that's how the scholars refute the Ra'i of Sahaba as a source of Shariah. Ra'i of Sahaba, which we discuss later on. The individual opinion of a Sahabi cannot be a dalil, because you cannot have conflict within the source itself. If you have Abu Bakr saying one thing and that is dalil, and Umar saying something opposite and that is dalil, then which one is dalil? See the problem? So there is no ijma. This is not a case of consensus. Ijma is only consensus. The Sahaba simply accepted that both of them are legitimate ijtihadat. Both of them are legitimate opinions from Islam, but they are opinions. They are not dalil. Not everything was explained explicitly in the Prophet's lifetime. That's why the concept of ijtihad exists in Islam. The Prophet left that and explained that concept. Actually, the Prophet wanted the Sahaba to be trained in ijtihad. So sometimes, we'll come to it later in the section of ijtihad, the Prophet told one of the companions to judge in a case. And the companion said, but you are here, why don't you judge? The Prophet said, even so, you judge. And if you get it right, you will get 10 rewards in this hadith, he said. And if you get it wrong, you'll get 1 reward. He's trying to push the Sahaba to make ijtihad within his lifetime. Why? Because he knows it is inconceivable for him to clarify every single matter until the Day of Judgment. That's why he wanted the Sahaba to have the concept of ijtihad, that they are able after his death to deal with all new scenarios. Okay? So the fact that Allah has left ayat which are not definitive in meaning, that is the proof from Quran of ijtihad. There is an ayah which we studied later or earlier on, which says there is muhkamat and mutashabihat. There are the clear matters and the unclear matters. So this is a proof of ijtihad. First. Secondly, it is in the Sunnah, clear-cut in Bukhari and Muslim and so many hadith. Also, that ijtihad is there as a concept. So, from Quran, yes, you can prove ijtihad because there are ayat which are ambiguous in the language. They're not clear-cut. So that proves that somebody has to interpret it. These are the sources of law. This is not the deen. You need somebody now, a doctor of law, to extract from the sources of law, i.e. the mujtahid. The mujtahid extracts from the sources of law the ahkam sharia. Yeah. Why is Islam so complicated? We explained that ikhtilaf is not something that is bad. It is a mercy. The scholars said it is a rahmah upon the ummah. Why? If we were not allowed to differ, then we would never be able to extract for new matters. Because we would not understand the text in depth. Not conceivable. I gave an example. Think of a book. How big would a book be that would reveal everything until the day of judgment? It is not conceivable. The book would be never ending. You need to, Allah in His wisdom has revealed the sources of law that we can deal with every single matter until the day of judgment according to those sources. It is not conceivable within 23 years of prophethood Allah to reveal for every single matter directly. He can put the sources, which is the beauty of Islam, and those sources can lead to be extracted for all different times and places.